Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me. I am Sergey Katsev, VP of Engineering at Catchpoint, and I'll be talking about how the internet is your new network and what exactly that means. So, kind of an agenda. I'll talk a little bit about me, but really only about the parts of that you need to know about, the parts that are applicable to this talk. And then we'll get into kind of the meat of it. Why we say that the internet is complex, although it shouldn't be a surprise to anybody. But those of us that are IT or developers or site reliability practitioners, we're still expected to fix it immediately. And so I'll present this tool we call the Internet Stack that helps you kind of break down and understand what is going on with the internet from the point of view that you care about. And finally, we'll talk about how ntop helps us fill some visibility requirements that we couldn't do previously, but now we can. And especially now that this changing or changed landscape called work from home has happened, how that's become a lot more important. So real quickly about me, as I said, I'm VP of Engineering at Catchpoint. I run the product engineering and data analytics and QA teams. But before Catchpoint, I worked on boxes you see along the bottom there. So I worked at Coyote Point, where we made application delivery controllers. Then I worked at Fortinet, where I made security modules for various appliances. And then I worked at Interface Masters and Niagara Networks, where we made switches and packet brokers and things like that. So keep that in mind for a second. I was focused on the box. Real quick aside, in the room right there in Pisa is this guy. So I'm not sure where exactly he's sitting. He's very small on my screen, but Alessandro runs the Italian team at Catchpoint, loves answering questions. So if you don't get to ask me, please ask him. Back to the main talk. So this is what I was used to in my sort of appliance bubble, right? I knew that there were users coming into the appliance. I knew that there were applications that they were connecting to. I didn't really care what was going on outside of them. I just cared about what was going on inside of the box. But that's not reality. The reality, if the slide will change, thank you. The reality is that it's a lot more complex than that. There are all sorts of different users connecting from anything from a phone to a coffee shop to their house to an office to an airplane. The applications themselves, of course, are varied both in how they're deployed and what the application is. But then there's this big box in the middle, just titled Internet and Services. But those are all things that users don't even typically think about, that their traffic goes through to get to the applications. And if there are problems with anything in that box, your application is down or has poor performance. So to summarize, internet is complex. And anytime something is complex, you need multiple different techniques to understand that complexity. And in this case, we're focusing on performance. So multiple techniques to understand the performance. So just to rewind a little bit, I think about things in terms of report cards or scorecards. And so in my I only care about the box perspective, this was my scorecard, right? So didn't care about the applications, didn't care about any of these dependencies. If I didn't have control over the infrastructure, there was nothing I can do about it. So that's red. So okay, I a lot of red, a little bit of green, a little bit of yellow. Then I came over to Catchpoint, and Catchpoint's whole point is to observe from everywhere. And so there's a lot more visibility and far fewer blind spots, right? Catchpoint is able to handle visibility for internal applications and external applications and the network and all of these dependencies. And we had this blind spot, or somewhat of a blind spot, I called it yellow, for internal applications with low or no control. And I'll get back to that later because that's exactly where ntop is helping us. So while this complexity is increasing, your job or my job or our job is still to detect, identify, and fix faster and faster and faster, right? Which doesn't make sense. Things that are more complex usually take longer, but that's the mandate. And so the traditional way of doing this is you set up some alerts based on some metric. And if the metric goes above that threshold, you get an alert, and then you figure out what's going on. Well, that's not good enough anymore. So now you need to have different sources of this telemetry to get the alert faster. And then when the alert comes in, to actually have all of the data already there and analyzed by whatever tool you're using so that you can fix and resolve the problem faster. So that's the goal here. And so I alluded to this, but there's kind of two distinct areas that we need to focus on for visibility. There are all of the code and applications and infrastructure that you own and you have full control over. You have full control over them. You can do whatever you want. So you can use tools like APM, application performance monitoring, logging, tracing, network performance monitoring, anything you want. And then there's everything else. So this ranges from maybe a SaaS tool that you're connecting to over the internet where you have limited control over it, to a third-party dependency like maybe your DNS provider that maybe you don't even think about, but you certainly have probably no control over it. And so at Catchpoint, we think about this whole gamut of applications, of tools, et cetera, as the internet stack. And we talk about the visibility of the internet stack using internet performance monitoring, which combines, as I keep saying, all of these different vantage points to make sure that you have the right visibility to see into that stack. And so when I do these kind of sessions with others, when I have more time, I'll usually have them fill out a sheet like this. And in fact, since one of my roles is as head of security compliance, I fill out a sheet very much like this when we do our business impact analysis. And so the goal is you map out internal applications, customer applications, dependencies, and you figure out, okay, how much control do I have over them? So since we don't have time, I filled in an example. And so this is for a typical company. A typical company might have some internal applications, and maybe for them, Salesforce is relatively higher control because it's deployed to some private environment. Okay, that's the case for them. But Zoom is very low control because it's entirely within the Zoom data center and they can't do anything about it. Then their customer application, the actual SaaS product that they're developing and releasing and their customers are paying for, well, can't get much higher control than that, right? They control the network, they control the application, they can do whatever they want. Great. But things like Zendesk, we use it, for example, for customer support tickets. It's still a customer-facing application. Customers need to get to Zendesk or else they don't have as good of an experience with Catchpoint, but we don't have control over it. It runs in Zendesk's data centers. And then you map out all of these dependencies. So I mentioned your BGP peers, next hop, other hops to get to critical providers, your DNS, your email, your CDN, et cetera. And keep in mind that this is just an example. And for every company, the level of control might be different, and even which box it fits into might be different. So here I have email as a low control dependency, but if you were running your own email server, maybe it's actually a high control internal application. And so why does it matter, right? Or which ones matter? Well, it's easy. The ones that matter are the ones that impact either revenue or productivity. If that application is down or it's slow or it's unreliable, If that causes you to make less money or it makes your employees less productive, then it's an important application that you care about, that you need to do everything you can to have it be performant, to have it function as it should. And so we think about this as resiliency, which is composed of availability, reliability, performance, and reachability. And zooming out a little bit, you can think of it as, for my internet stack to be resilient, I need to make sure my customers are having a good experience. I need to make sure my employees are having a good experience. My applications are performing the way that they should. My network is performing the way that it should. And I've reduced the third-party risk to a manageable level. So that last one just means if I have a critical application that absolutely must be up or else my business fails, I better lower the risk by adding a backup, right? That's what risk management is all about. So that's what we care about. Now let's talk about the visibility piece of it. There's two main ways that monitoring is done: active monitoring and passive monitoring. Active or synthetic monitoring, you simulate actual users of the application to proactively find problems before they do. So this could be simulated users of your external customer-facing application. It could be simulated users of your employees, or it could be simulated users of you if you're doing testing of some internal API or one of these dependency applications. The other approach is real user monitoring or passive monitoring, or RUM. And RUM has two main problems. Number one is it's very noisy. So think about, I have a picture here of a Windows 3.1 computer from 30 years ago, I guess. If somebody uses that computer to go to your website and somebody else uses a new computer to go to your website, you could be pretty sure they're going to have vastly different experiences. But you, as the website administrator, do you care about the person connecting from Windows 3.1? Probably not. So your RUM telemetry needs to have that context information to say, these are the data points that I care about, and these are the ones that I don't. The second problem is even more important. By the time you see an error in your RUM data, a customer has already had that problem. Right? This is real user monitoring. You're actually recording what the customer has seen. And so the goal with any good monitoring solution is to combine the two. You want to monitor proactively, and you want to make sure that customers are actually having a good experience using RUM. How can we do that? So again, we go back to high control application and low control application. If you have a high control application, you can do whatever you want. You can use synthetic and RUM to measure from where the users are located. You can use APM and NPM to measure from inside of the application or the network. If it's an internal application, you can use endpoint monitoring, which I'll talk about in a second. And you combine all of that telemetry to get the full visibility. Great. High control applications are easy. Low control applications, a lot of those options go away. You can't use RUM or APM or NPM anymore because you don't own or control the application or the network. So synthetic is a great start. It shows you that outside-in perspective of what users might encounter if they're using the application. But let's add another wrinkle. What if this application is a low control application and it's only accessible from your employee's computer? So think about internal applications that you need to connect through VPN, for example. That wasn't such a huge deal until a few years ago, but then work from home happened. And so with work from home, you've probably seen metrics like these. This one's a couple of years old, but it doesn't matter if you're part of the 62 or the 25 or the 13. A lot of us are working either hybrid or from home nowadays. And so for IT teams, that means that instead of having one office with 200 employees to monitor and to troubleshoot and to help, now you have 200 offices with one employee each. with a different network environment in each, with a different systems connected to their network, different ISPs. And now you can no longer deploy monitoring to the network. You have to deploy it to the device itself, to the endpoint. And that's where endpoint monitoring comes in. So with endpoint monitoring, you can do your synthetic testing to proactively monitor APIs or whatever you need to monitor your applications. That's great. But RUM is harder. For web applications, it's pretty straightforward. You can use various browser tools to see what the browser is doing, to record how long it takes to load a website, for example. But native applications are tricky. And that's where ntop comes in for us. So our team spoke to customers, and customers said this. They want UCaaS monitoring, Unified Communication as a Service. And why do they need it? Well, they want to know if a call is going to succeed or if it's going to have a bad experience. They want to know which service they should use if they have multiple services. They want to know the reason that a call failed. Was it the network, the device, or the application? And so you see I've included little arrows there. And for most of those, in order to figure out what happened, you need a combination of that synthetic and RUM data. And the RUM data we're collecting using ntop. So what we did was we deployed nprobe onto these endpoints. And nprobe is actually monitoring the RTP, real-time transport protocol, to tell us things like R factor, which is the actual quality of the call, but also things like the network metrics, jitter, RTT packet loss. And all of those help us understand, is it the application, the system, or the network, right? One of the core requirements. And then the other great thing that ntop did was they're actually bubbling these up to say, not only is this a bunch of different RTP streams, but these are the streams associated with a particular call in Zoom. These are the streams associated with a particular call in Teams. And so this is the result. It's very simple for a customer, right? All they see is, all right, here's the call quality, right? In this case, 20, that's not very good. But under the covers, they don't care. They don't need to know what's actually going on, but all of that telemetry is being collected and combined between synthetic and RUM. And so with this addition of ntop, happy to say the scorecard is all green. And it really helps. It's a partnership that makes sense for Catchpoint, right? Catchpoint, we care about monitoring what matters from where it matters. Well, now we can monitor more things. That's the what, because of this technology that ntop is providing for us. And from where it matters goes up as well, because each one of these endpoints is now a new vantage point where our customers can use to collect their telemetry data from. So it's been a great experience so far. I look forward to adding more applications monitored by ntop in the future. And I will stop there. Thank you all so much. If there are any questions, happy to answer them.
Thank you.